Thank you very much, Mr. Datta, for that wonderful presentation. It was indeed eye-opening. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time to move to the next session of the event. The session is about looking beyond borders, balanced, holistic, and futuristic strategies. In this session, we shall talk about the state of the global problem of illicit trade, its visible outcomes and measurable impacts. Also, we shall discuss about how the potential of multilateralism through intergovernmental actions could be harnessed. I would now like to call upon stage session chair, Mr. Najib Shah, former chairman, Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs, and think tank member, FICCI Cascade. Mr. Najib Shah on the stage, please. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Najib Shah with a huge round of applause. I would also now like to call upon the speakers, Mr. Julian Saldana, First Secretary, HM Revenue and Customs, British High Commission on the stage, Mr. Hugh Watkins, Head of Asia Policy, Intellectual Property Office, UK, Mr. Tim Shepherd, Councillor, Australian High Commission, Colonel Ismi Vincenzo Tuzzi, Guardia de Finanza Attaché Embassy of Italy, on the stage, please. I would also now like to call Ms. Shilpi Jha, Senior Legal Counsel for Intellectual Property, South Asia Embassy of the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, a huge round of applause for all the speakers here, please.
Good morning, everybody. We have had a most stimulating first quarter of what is going to be a two-day seminar. We have had an outstanding study report also presented. We may quibble about the details there, but the fact remains that what the study report does highlight is something we may all agree with, that we have a serious problem at hand and we need to counter it. At the end of the day, countering such a menace which has global overtones requires cooperation. And nothing better than having this formidable array of speakers along with me here to share their experiences of how they have tackled this particular problem in each one of their countries. Because ultimately, the problems are very similar. Crooks everywhere are the same, and they display greater cooperation amongst each other than what governmental institutions unfortunately do because of multiple constraints. So we have with us representatives from UK, Australia, Italy, and an IP expert. I would briefly introduce each one of them as they proceed to speak. The first speaker will be Mr. Tim Shepherd, who is a counsellor with the Australian Border Force, presently posted in the Australian High Commission in Delhi. He has been with the Australian Border Force for long years. He has also had international exposure and is one of the few enforcement officers who has also spent time in the taxation office in Australia doing the policy measures, because very many times the policy does not keep pace with enforcement, and he has had experience in both places. He has been seconded to the Papua New Guinea Customs Service, where he worked as a senior advisor. He's presently a counsellor of the Australian Border Force in the Australian High Commission in New Delhi, with jurisdiction spread over Bangladesh, Nepal, and Bhutan. And I must also add that he has not been keeping too well, but has nevertheless been kind enough to come. So please join me in welcoming him to make his presentation.
Firstly, thank you to FICCI Cascade for the opportunity to talk today. I'm sorry if my voice is a bit strange, but as the chair said, I'm not feeling the best. I will probably leave after my presentation, so if there's anything that interests you that you'd like to talk to me about, just contact Swati at Vicky Cascade, and she can put you in contact with me. So when I saw the theme for session 1, balanced, holistic and futuristic strategies, I was immediately taken with the word holistic and decided that that is what I would focus on. So what does holistic mean? Well, an holistic approach to problem solving is one that looks at the complete system and assumes that everything in the system is interconnected. Now, this method dictates that you can't solve a problem by just fixing one part of the system, or the problem will simply move. You need to approach a problem from multiple directions. Now, as a law enforcement officer, I think I can safely say that that's not something that law enforcement officers are necessarily very good at. We tend to take the view that the only way to crack a nut is with a hammer, and if that doesn't work, we need more hammers and bigger hammers. Now, this approach actually works quite well with nuts, but it doesn't work particularly well with increasingly sophisticated transnational crime. So today, in the spirit of holistic responses, I'm going to talk briefly about the way that Australia has chosen to tackle the problem of illegal tobacco smuggling, and how we've done this by approaching it from a number of different directions. Some of these relate to law enforcement, but others relate to policy and relate to regulation, with the view that if we can minimise the risk up front, there is less work for our law enforcement officers to do. So why is illicit tobacco even an issue in Australia? Well, there are various estimates on the size of the illicit tobacco problem in Australia. We've estimated that 5.6% of the tobacco market is taken up in illegal trade, a figure that's not that different from the figures I saw the earlier speaker put up for India. And in Australia, this equates to 600 million Australian dollars in lost revenue each year. So why is there an illicit market at all in Australia? Well, Australia has the highest tax rates on tobacco products in the world, closely followed by New Zealand. Currently, the amount of duty or tax paid on an individual cigarette in Australia is 69 cents, or $1,175 per kilo of tobacco product. Now, this has resulted in the average packet containing, say, 20 cigarettes, costing about $40 to purchase over the counter in Australia, significantly higher than what it costs to buy a packet of cigarettes just across the counter in most places in Asia. Now, these high tax rates are an intentional decision by the Australian government to try and reduce the number of Australians who smoke and to channel the revenue that we collect towards medical treatment and harm reduction strategies. But the side effect of this is that it makes the illegal importation of tobacco extremely attractive. So this map here gives you a picture of what it costs to buy a packet of 20 cigarettes throughout Asia Pacific. And you can see that Australia is right at the top. Myanmar at the bottom, $1.24. Indonesia, $2.36. So there's a huge difference in what it costs to legally acquire product in Asia Pacific and what it will fetch in Australia. In fact, the rate of duty is so high that it even makes smuggling through the airport stream an attractive proposition. So you recall I said that there's over $1,000 of revenue on a kilo of tobacco products. So you can imagine that a 20-kilo suitcase, an ordinary suitcase of the type that you cart through an airport, potentially has $20,000 worth of potential revenue evasion hidden inside it. Now, these duty rates will only increase. In Australia, they are indexed twice a year. They go up automatically in February and September, and the government's legislated a further 12.5% rise in 2021. So the gap will continue to grow. Now this becomes highly attractive to organised crime. The returns are high, and they perceive the risks as much less than other illicit goods like narcotics. On a relatively modest initial investment, importing a container of illicit cigarettes can deliver a 5,000% return on investment, and nowhere near the same kind of fines or penal provisions as narcotics. So criminals who used to engage in narcotics are shifting into the illicit tobacco space. And again, simply because the revenue returns are so high. We have increased our fines and our prison terms for tobacco smuggling. We now have 10 years of imprisonment for tobacco smuggling and a penalty worth 5 times the amount of duty evaded. So again, you can imagine that fine is substantial. But we found that the penalties handed down by courts have not been sufficiently high to really push the level of deterrent that we would like. So the government has responded with what they've called the Black Economy Package, which is a range of initiatives that attempt to deal with illicit tobacco risk. Now the first is a whole of government approach to law enforcement. We have a lot of law enforcement agencies in Australia playing in the tobacco space. In order to use those more effectively and more efficiently, we've brought them all together into a single organisation called the Illicit Tobacco Task Force, which sits inside the Australian Border Force, which is Australia's customs service. So it holds the ABF, the Ministry of Home Affairs, the Australian Taxation Office, the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission, AUSTRAC, which is our financial intelligence unit, and the Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecutions. Now, the early returns on this approach have been particularly good, and in the 12 months ending 30 June this year, the ABF successfully seized more than 600 tonnes of illicit tobacco, worth an estimated 600 million Australian dollars in evaded duty. But what else have we done? And this is where we come to some of the regulatory approaches. So from the 1st of July, we have made the importation of tobacco into Australia prohibited without a permit. So tobacco is a prohibited import, just as firearms are, just as daggers are, just as a multitude of dangerous goods are. And what difference does this make? Well, it makes a big difference. Before we were dealing with revenue offences, we were having to prove the elements of smuggling offences and evasion offences, which could sometimes be quite difficult. Now our approach is, you don't have a permit, it's a prohibited import, we simply seize it. And we don't issue permits after importation. You have to have the permit in your hand before the goods land in Australia. So you can't take a go and say, aha, if they catch me, I'll then apply for a permit. You've got to have the permit already. And we don't allow permits for the mail stream, the international mail stream. So we now have nil tobacco, or nil cigarettes, I should say, coming through international mail. There is an ongoing permission for travellers to bring tobacco through the airport, but this is limited. This is like an umbrella permit, but it's limited to our tobacco concessions. And our passenger concessions for tobacco is one unopened packet and one opened packet. So we're talking about no more than 39 cigarettes, which is not a lot. So first measure, let's make tobacco a prohibited import. The second thing we've done is change the way we approach warehousing, which both the tobacco industry and customs would be very familiar with in India. We have made a policy decision and enacted law that says that licensed warehouses, customs warehouses, bonds, if that's the terminology, cannot store tobacco. All tobacco has to be cleared and duty paid at the border on arrival. So there's no underbond movements of tobacco, there's no underbond storage of tobacco. It's arrived and it's held perhaps for a small time at an unpacked depot, but then it has to be duty paid. And this addresses the involvement of illegal criminal elements in theft and diversion from the movement of tobacco around Australia, and from licensed premises. So prohibited import, and you can't store it under bond, you've got to pay for it. So basically the presumption then is that everything that's moving around Australia is duty paid. The next thing we've done, which goes back into the law enforcement space, is to change some of our offences. So we've introduced a new offence with a lower standard, where it's only necessary for us to prove recklessness rather than intent or knowledge. So we don't have to prove that someone intentionally smuggled tobacco, simply that they imported tobacco with reckless disregard as to whether it was duty paid, which makes life much easier. We've also changed some of the elements so that we no longer have to differentiate between domestic tobacco and imported tobacco and prove which kind it is in pursuing an offence. The next thing we've done is enact legislation that enables us to immediately destroy tobacco when we've seized it. So normally for prohibited imports, an importer has 30 days to lay claim on the goods. For revenue offences, they have 90 days to lay claim on the goods. And we store goods in that period. With tobacco now, we will simply destroy it immediately. And this addresses a huge issue we have with people dragging out appeal processes and solves a huge problem we have with storing multiple 40-foot containers of tobacco product. If someone subsequently lays claim to the goods successfully, so perhaps they proved that they did have a permit but couldn't present it at the time, then we will pay them the revenue, we will pay them the value of the goods that we destroyed. But we won't hold up destroying the goods in the first instance. The other thing that we've done is to really ramp up our level of industry engagement. So we have an illicit tobacco industry group with key players in the tobacco industry that meets twice a year, and we work very closely with industry, recognising that this is not a problem that can be solved by one person and one person only. We also have our Border Watch program, which is our hotline for people to dob in illegal activity, and that's increasingly being used for illicit tobacco as well, not just other kinds of offences. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Tim, for having given us a very, very detailed exposition of how Australia has been handling the problem. Before I let you go, can I ask you a question or two? Okay. I was wondering whether Australia has any domestic cultivation and manufacture and production of tobacco. Yeah, it works.
The short answer to that is no. They reached a point where the tobacco majors who manufacture cigarette products in Australia realised that domestically grown tobacco was no longer competitively priced. At that point, they still continue to manufacture in Australia. They use imported tobacco leaf for that. Now, that creates, in some ways, that reduces one of our risks, because before we had diversion from domestic tobacco farmers into the illicit industry. Well, that doesn't happen because there is no legal industry. But some tobacco farmers, some farmers have been farming for many generations. I'm not suggesting tobacco farmers per se are still doing it, but there is because the profit is so large, there is still the risk of illicit crops feeding into the illegal market. Yes.
And while you have mentioned the slew of measures you put in place, what has been the success ultimately? You are conspicuously silent on that particular aspect.
So the policy elements are still very new, only introduced on the 1st of July this year. What has been going for a bit longer, in a different form, is our illicit tobacco task force. And that has shown very large returns in a short period of time. So the idea of multiple agencies cooperating with each other instead of falling over each other and engaging strongly with industry has seen, as I said, significant amounts of tobacco being seized in the last financial year.
Thank you so much, Tim. I can clearly see you're uncomfortable. Please go and rest and get well soon. Thank you so much. I think the questions for him will be taken by Swati later. Thank you so much. We now move to our second speaker, Colonel Vincenzo Tusi from the Embassy of Italy. He has been an active member of the Italian police force. He is heading the regional tax police in Milan, part of the organized crime investigation group. He has been awarded multiple times the Silver Cross of Merit of the Italian Red Cross, the Gold Cross for length of service, awarded the Silver Medal for Civil Valor, the Medal of Gold to the military about long command. So he comes with the formidable credentials. He is now currently posted in the Embassy of Italy in Delhi and will share his experiences with us. Vincento.
Working? Okay, thank you. Okay, stereo. Okay. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon also. Good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very glad to be here. I'd like to thank Vicky Cascato for this invitation. And I prepared this very light presentation just to give you some pieces of information about our approach to the fraud. Italian Guardia di Finanza is a military law enforcement with over 55,000 people involved in many fields of action in economic and financial matters. Financial investigation, our core business. Globalization has brought changes in economics system, but also in illicit traffic. Starting from this objective awareness and due to the assumption based on data analysis and having in mind the seizures of illicit products, their kind, their value, it comes just a conclusion due to my police officer experience that led me think about it. In the next slide, you could see the most unusual kind of products that have been confiscated in Italy in recent times. As you can see, the result of the seizures, let us conclude that we have to face with a powerful criminal organization, probably located in a place or more places in the Far East, where they are used to produce all this kind of counterfeit goods. No matter with their values, the point is that they could be sold on international markets. This is one of the possible reasons to understand the seizure of so many low-value products. We could believe that there is a large criminal organization keeping under control our markets and economies before it starts producing counterfeit goods, so that it can decide what kind of product has to be made, and where has to be placed. For these reasons, this should be the better use of our systems and organization. In addition, legislation and international cooperation are the most important field in law enforcement activity. For example, legislation, I think that every country should have the same penalties for certain kind of fraud. This could facilitate cooperation in countering operation. On those basis, we are using a system called Anti-Counterfeiting Information System. It was created from the awareness that in order to face a multidimensional and transversal illegal phenomenon, such as counterfeiting, all institutional bodies and players involved in combating the fake industry should join forces. It allows a very close cooperation between all these different stakeholders. It is based on a website backed by huge hardware for the database. It's a very cool device. At the operational level, basically, the system allows IPRs holders to work actively with law enforcement by sending pieces of information about their products that could be a target for fraud. On a quarterly basis, the IPRs holders receive a report on fraud and any other information useful for the protection of their rights. On the other hand, the ground support units feed the application with data concerning investigation carried out on fraud due to the operational support given to IPR's owner. This database set up a very useful feedback through data and risk analysis and for statistics purposes. This could be the starting point for further investigation or projects launched by the special units and the headquarters too, on tactical and strategic level. As you can see, this is the holistic approach. As you can see, all the stakeholders in there. But merely enforcing the law against infringement is not enough. There is a need for attaching great importance to the economic and financial manifestation of crimes. We can safely say that a criminal organization is not completely dismantled until all its supporters or associates have not been brought to justice and the sources of its wealth have not completely been drained. This last goal is always to achieve with great tenacity and determination. In any operation on illicit traffic, it would always be necessary to refer to the fall of the money phase. Encourage the creation of regulatory mechanisms aiming at locating, blocking, freezing any criminal illicit sources of revenues. Identify and freeze the illegal assets represent an important boost to the operational strategies to fight all criminal establishment that gaining from the illicit trafficking. Italian authorities have already taken action on several fronts, introducing very powerful measures targeting illicit wealth accumulated, used, and reinvested by the fraudsters. The criminal code now provides that in all cases it is prosecuted for certain kind of fraud, a mandatory confiscation is ordered for the things that serve or that were aimed at committing the crime, and the things that are the price, the product, the profits, or that which constitutes the head. When compulsory seizure of assets and proceeds directly applicable to fraud offenses cannot be performed, the court may order the confiscation of sovereign money, assets, or other utilities of an equivalent value to the price or profits ensuing from the offenses and which the offender has the availability, although legitimately acquired with own capital or other incomes from third parties. This because of difficulties in the investigation, for lack of useful proofs regarding the capital and the assets accumulated and reused by the perpetrators of fraud using nominees, intermediaries, and tricky financial channels in order to hide the reconstruction of the links with the crime. In addition, it can be applied the disproportional confiscation where a criminal conspiracy has been found. This means that it must always proceed to the seizure and later confiscation of money, goods, and utilities, assets, whose origin cannot be found, and that the fraudsters are the holders or have the availability, even through a dear person or entity, when their values are out of all proportion to the value of declared incomes or to their business. Regarding people who normally are dedicated to illicit trafficking and because of their standard of living that may be considered to live habitually, either in part or in total, with the proceeds of criminal activities, can be also activated the asset investigation and other preventive measures, both on personal and on assets profile, even separately regarding criminal investigation and procedures. At the end, I'd like to move to another important aspect. Internet fraud is worrying and rapidly increasing and reaching a large proportion of and various kinds of population. For this reason, you see the manifestation of this kind of illicit. It would be desirable to have greater and better tools to tackle all of this. I think that one of the most effective tools would be undercover operations, such as simulated purchase. The possibility to perform undercover operations in combating fraud on the web would have two positive effects. Repressive, quite clear. Preventive, make available information that law enforcement and other anti-fraud organizations are going to act on the web could force the fraudster to give up using the web for their illicit purposes. This covers the main points. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vincenzo, for your sharing the experience of Italy. You have again highlighted the need for coordination, cooperation, and the holistic approach. If I may ask, is there any problem of cooperation between the agencies, of turf issues, of issues of trying to take credit for actions done by one another? Because that's really the key. Your phrase, never stop fighting till the fight is done. Does it lead to fight amongst the agencies itself?
The problem I think that we encounter is the different, as I told before in my presentation, is a different legislation. It's one of the main issue in Europe. We have some problem with for us, for instance, a fact is a crime, in another country is not. And so this is a very difficult approach because, you know, if you have a criminal offense, is a thing very speed that you can also say to the other colleague in the other country to have much more strength on your action. But I think that one of the most important thing to remember is that we have to know what happens on the ground. This is a very, with the system that I explained, the anti-counterfeit information system, we have since 2014, so we have 5 years of implementation of the system, but we are very proud of it because we know exactly what happens on the ground. You know, you can also imagine that you can have an illicit traffic in a various parts of the territory of Italy, and for that you can approach in a way rather than another. And I think that the best way to do is to know exactly what happens on the ground. That is the first thing, and I think that also here can be a very powerful issue, because if you don't know, it's difficult to have an approach to the problem.
Thank you. Our next set of speakers who demonstrate the need for coordination and cooperation are going to make a joint presentation, both from the British High Commission, Mr. Julian Saldana, First Secretary of HM Revenue and Customs. He is the representative here with jurisdiction spread over Bhutan, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. Comes with more than 35 years of experience in handling direct and indirect taxes and leading criminal investigations. He is joined by Mr. Hugh Watkins, who's head of the Asia Policy of Intellectual Property Office in UK, a former police officer, again with long years of experience, who has retired from service but then joined IPO, and from what he told me, is enjoying his stint in the IPO, both for the challenges it presents and the fact that he has a jurisdiction spread across large part of Asia. May I request both Julian and Hugh now to give their presentations.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the British Government, can I thank Vicky for the honour of this invite. I'm sure Julian will echo that in a moment. I'd like to congratulate Vicky on such a polished performance. The set is absolutely superb. Well done on that. One of the reasons why we are going to talk as a pair is that when we were talking earlier in the week about what we wanted to speak, we realised actually instead of doing two presentations, we can do one and reflect how our work coincides. So I'll just do a little introduction to some of the logos on the slides. Obviously at the top, Intellectual Property Office of the UK is part of the government. And as the Chair mentioned, I was very fortunate when I left the police. I retired from the police as a head of intelligence in my local force to move into what's been a fascinating time. This is my second time in India. I'm assuring you it will not be my last. I've been delighted with the way that the UK government has been welcomed, Vicky and other government partners, and also to industry associations, REACT, MASCRADE, just to name a few there. So the other logos, I'm a member of the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime. To my surprise, I was invited to join them as a subject matter expert on transnational IP crime. That's gained during my time with the intelligence side, and then over to the other side, then the Siracusa National International Institute. I'm currently a member of the management committee for a project, and if I would invite any of the delegates here, if you'd like to know more about the Global Initiative or the Siracusa Institute, please access their websites. The project on illicit trade will apply in India equally as it applies across the rest of the world. So, we're going to have a quiz now. This is where you guys who've been sat there all day, patient, I'm going to ask some questions. With the permission of the Chair, I'm going to steal a microphone. Thank you very much. Now, the first figure, 2.5%. Would anyone like to guess? Because you can guess all of these. Anyone like to guess what 2.5% relates to? I'm sure somebody must have an idea. No? We'll see how we get on with this. Julian.
Oh, this one, sure.
There you go. 2.5% of exports worldwide are counterfeit goods. It's very important that you remember that because you'll see why the UK puts the amount of effort in that we do in a moment. 6.5%. This is disturbing. Any takers? Any takers at all? Okay, Joel?
That's items used in IT and communication are counterfeit.
So when you think of the potential impact of counterfeit goods in IT systems across the world, it's quite startling. 4 to 5%, if anybody gets this, I will willingly go and buy them a bottle of whiskey. Ah, go ahead. Sorry? No, it's not. It's
Shall I give them the answer?
Gurpreet, thank you for holding your hand up, but it's not that. Yeah, please.
4 to 5% goods imported into the UK are counterfeit. Oops. Wrong button.
No, hang on.
I only had one job.
There we go. That is the reason why the UK takes this very, very seriously. You'll see 2.5% of exports are counterfeits. In the UK, nearly double that are imported. And that's the ones we know about. These figures, by the way, are not ours. They're not the British government's. They're OECD's, and there's a reference there. Finally, would anyone like to guess what the 6% relates to? Thank you, Surya. Yes,
I think that was the right answer.
that was a right answer.
Sixth in
It wasn't the
counterfeit.
whiskey, mind.
No.
The whiskey was the one before.
6th in world counterfeit production, India.
Now, compared to the 85% of counterfeits produced by China and Hong Kong, that 6% and 6th in the ranking is down there. It is down there. However, Mr. Modi wants goods made in India. That 6% of world production is harming India's business. It harms India's legitimate business, and we are here to try and see what we can do between us. The whole idea of this session, looking beyond borders, is what can we do together? So, apologies for the slight hiccup. This is the Global Illicit Trade Index, which ranks the UK as second. As you will have heard, one of the reasons why we are successful in our work is because we have a big challenge. We have a huge challenge because the amount of money lost to the Treasury every year from illicit goods is huge. So what do we do about it? This is a framework designed by myself and a colleague. And when we looked at the life cycle of counterfeit goods, this is what we looked at. And we decided we would focus on how are these goods ordered? What mechanisms are used to order counterfeit goods? Where are they manufactured? Can the UK work with either the manufacturing the manufacturing countries or transit countries to try and see what we can do to build our picture up? Then we look at shipping. And I'm sure now I'll hand over on that moment to Julian.
Okay. I represent Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, and we are the UK's national authority for all indirect and direct taxes and customs duties. Hugh and I met for the first time yesterday. We were comparing our presentations and realized they pretty much overlapped. And in the spirit of the holistic theme of this event, we thought, well, it's better to work together because it shows two UK government agencies working in tandem, tackling the same problem. I work for an organisation that has 83,000 people, and we collect £575 billion in revenue each year. Now, although I'm of Indian heritage, I can't speak Hindi, and I cannot express numbers in lakhs and crores. So if anybody can help me with those two numbers, I'd be most grateful. So in my next presentation, I can express them in Indian numbers. I'm one of 40 overseas liaison officers. We're spread covering about 100 countries. And we work with local law enforcement authorities, in my case, principally the CBIC and the DRI. And from an upstream perspective, in India, we work through memorandums of understanding. At the moment, it's an EU, because we're still part of the EU for another month at least. So we're working on that basis. And this really is where Hugh and I have decided that although Hugh has very good relationships with HMRC in the UK, this has prompted us really to look to see how we can work together upstream and share intelligence.
Thanks, Julian. And coming on to the shipping area, we work with, I mentioned BASCAP earlier on, the Business Action to Stop Counterfeiting and Piracy have produced a very interesting report around what businesses can do to bring influence on the shippers. We work with the shippers, we work with not just the deep sea routes, we also work in the UK with the fast parcel shippers. And again, we come back to public attitudes. Public want to shop online. When they buy online, it doesn't come on a ship, it comes via air. So again, we work with those. One of the key decisions the IPO has made recently has been to fund 2 posts in the UK's border force. We're very fortunate in the UK that we are an island. Anything illicit goods or illicit goods coming into the UK has to come over the sea, on the sea, or in the case of the Channel Tunnel, under the sea. But in each case, our colleagues in Border Force, who do an incredibly good job, have quite a challenge. One of the benefits of funding 2 posts in Border Force is that we have a very effective sharing of intelligence. That's my former job, not the policy job that I'm currently doing. We then look at how are the goods transported, and this is where our organization's paths actually coincide, because we want to find out at what point, when goods are coming into the UK, how are they transported, because these goods then effectively become a cash commodity. And in the counterfeit world, goods are exchanged, except for online, goods are exchanged for cash. That cash transaction means they're not paying tax. So the opportunities for Julian's organization to gather tax are completely undermined. Then we look at wholesaling and reworking. And in this area, we have encountered sweatshops, we've encountered human exploitation, we've encountered all these things where goods are reworked or rebranded or relabeled in pretty poor conditions. Then we move on to the retail side. So as you can imagine, we work with different partners along all this framework. But the only organization that's involved in every step of the way is mine, the enforcement side of the UK IPO. And we share our intelligence willingly with international partners. We've had quite a number of successes. But Julian, what would you say would be your key opportunities for your intervention?
Where the HMRC can intervene, upstream we've already discussed, we need to work together more closely, but once a customs declaration is made, as Mr. Das mentioned in his speech earlier on, and because HMRC is almost analogous to CBIC, with the exception of dealing with prohibitions and restrictions, we cover GST as well in the UK. So all the way along the supply chain, from importation to retail, there is an opportunity for an intervention for HMRC. And I believe we work closely with the IPO in the UK in doing that. Plus, we have the full suite of powers. We have money laundering powers and criminal investigation powers, as well as civil recovery powers. So we can turn all of those powers to make an intervention.
And as Julian said, the money laundering side will become apparent in a moment. The IPO decided 4 years ago to invest in training 2 intelligence officers in financial investigations. When we had 3 cases that involved bad businesses that we had gathered intelligence on, we referred those to HMRC, who then recovered £600,000 back into the Treasury as a direct result of evaded tax. So that's just the first 3 cases. And as you can see there, that is what drives the criminal trade. I did promise to touch on free trade zones, and this is the first part of a couple of offers for anybody who can see some opportunities for research. We currently work with Northumbria University in the north of England. I've already mentioned the Syracuse Institute in Italy. Great trip, Vic. These are currently looking at free trade zones. Now, we all accept that free trade zones are a bonus, they're a boon for trade, they're also quite handy and very significant for criminals. Because of the lower customs intervention, they also mean goods, counterfeit goods, can move quickly through them. So, can I throw that offer out? Please, don't worry about thinking about it today. If you are aware of any university in India, any research fellows, anyone who might be interested in working with either Syracuse Institute or Northumbria University, please make contact, because that would be very much welcome. We've heard lots and lots of opportunities there about how do we collaborate, how do we engage. And for those who can't read, hopefully you can see these, G to G, government to government, B to B, business to business, government to business, business to government. These are all relationships. And one of the advantages of these relationships, that if we are all working together, what we can achieve for both countries is an improvement in ease of doing business. Now, hopefully, that won't be lost on the fact that we have a significant problem in the UK. I have found in this last week, I've made some very good new friends. I've learnt a huge amount about public attitudes in India to illegal streaming, to counterfeits. I'm going to be taking those back and working with them in the future. And in return, what I would like to do, as Julian enjoys his time in Delhi, I would like to come back frequently and work with the government of India, with the industry associations and the customs, and see what we can do to assist.
Yep.
Anything more from you, Julian?
No. All I will say is that yesterday, when I was practicing my lax and craws on an Indian colleague, he was surprised to learn that HMRC employs 83 million people. So if anybody can help me out with that, I'd be most grateful. Thank you.
And I've given the game away. This is the last time I was here. This was in Mumbai. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the welcome. And I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hugh. Thank you very much, Julian, for that most interesting presentation. You gave us a series of alphabets about the cooperation between B2B and so on and so forth, but the C2C cooperation between criminals across borders is what is prevailing, unfortunately. I think also your offer about studies about possible misuse of the FTZ regulations will be something which the CBIC will closely look at. I must mention the fact that the CBIC has created a chair in the National Law School, Bangalore, which is one of the premier law schools in the country, specifically for doing research on topics which otherwise the CBIC does not have the time to engage in. We are funding the chair, the CBIC rather is funding the chair, and I'm sure they will look at this offer of yours very, very closely. I will ensure I pass it on to them. Again, Julian, if I may ask you, your experience with interacting with the Indian enforcement agencies, the sort of cooperation which you're looking at across borders, what has been your experience?
I do have DRI officers present here, so I hope they won't mind me mentioning this about the very close working that we have with them, and very successfully. A couple of months ago, through DRI-derived intelligence, I won't go into operational details, but it resulted in the seizure of 3 containers of illicit cigarettes in Poland, with a UK revenue value of about £11 million. and that just shows how closely we work together with DRI in particular. It was a spectacular success, and hopefully that will be repeated.
And Hugh, what has been your experience so far?
I'm not as experienced as working directly with with enforcement in India. My role is somewhat different now. My role is about supporting businesses, supporting trade. I'm delighted to let you know that we've recruited a new IP attaché to be based in the British High Commission for India this week, and I look forward to working with Julian, seeing what intelligence we can put into enforcement, but it's looking good.
A major challenge in India for counterfeit goods is the movement across internet-based websites, the e-marketplace as you call it. And that's really the challenge here, because we're not able to reach the source of manufacture of these illicit products. How are UK handling these issues which you raised in one of your slides?
One of my former colleague in the Enforcement Directorate has an exceptionally good relationship with trading platforms in China. We are hoping in the not too distant future to sign a memorandum of understanding with trading platforms based in China and Southeast Asia. One of the things that we would be more than willing to do with our experience is share that with our international partner.
Any UK-based e-marketplaces? And is there a liability cast on them for selling a counterfeit product, which they may not be aware is counterfeit?
Yes, there was in Europe. There's been a landmark case where a market operator was held to be liable. That has never been tested online, but rest assured, the fact that that judgment exists is a very useful lever for our investigations to say to online marketplaces, you need to remove that. And we do that quite successfully.
Thank you so much. Our last speaker is Shilpi Jha, who's a senior legal counsel for intellectual property, South Asia, working currently with the Embassy of the United States of America based in Delhi. She is a counsel in the Office of the Patent and Trademark and responsible for monitoring, advising, analyzing, and reporting on intellectual property matters related to India with the jurisdiction spread to South Asian countries. She's also responsible for promoting high standards of intellectual property protection and enforcement, as well as fostering cooperation between US and the South Asian governments on intellectual property matters. Before joining this office, she had many years of legal practice and comes to us now with a lot of experience in these matters. Shilpi, the stage is yours.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, all of you. I know after that double dose presentation, nobody is in a mood to listen to my presentation. So being conscious of the fact that I'll be the last presenter, I have kept it very simple, so you don't need to worry about it. It's just 4 slides. And my presentation is not as technical as others because I knew that I'll not get that much of time and attention from your side. So as I'm from USP2, I'll just give a little more brief about my work. So I work with United States Patent Trademark Office. United States Patent Trademark Office has kept their attaché office all over the world. We have 13 offices, which we call as extension offices. The main purpose and focus of this particular office is to work with the government where we are based out on various policy gap analysis and to see what are the best collaboration, cooperation measure. So what this session is about, looking beyond borders. Frankly, we actually look beyond borders. So I personally handle all of SAARC nation, which includes Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Maldives, Sri Lanka, and India. So all these countries, what we have, that we have put a mechanism in place, like we have a IPR dialogue with the government of these countries. So some places like in India, we call IP forum, IP dialogue with the Indian government. In other countries like Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, we call it TIFA,
Trade Investment Forum agreements. So under that particular agreement, we discuss any trade issue which of course involves IPR. So, but my presentation will only focus on IPR, but that's the mechanism we in USPTO follow. So what we do is that, we work with the country to see what are the issues which is coming globally. For IPR, for the other laws and for the other issues, it's very easy for individual country to work in silos and come out with the solution. But for IPR, especially with e-commerce, globalization, and the kind of affordability that we have nowadays, things have become very difficult to handle, if it has goes beyond borders. Because things are beyond borders. We have been buying things from Amazon, which comes from whichever part of the world. So it's very difficult when we talk about IPR to manage it just sitting in India. So what we do is that, these are the country we covered. So what we do is that sitting here, we try to identify with interaction with all industry and government, what are the issues which is, I'll say global or inter-regional. So these are some of the issues. I'll not go into these issues in detail because today's session is about collaboration and coordination and looking forward. But these are some issues which USPTO has been tracking, called satellite piracy, drug trafficking, spurious drugs, and cybercrime, of course. So what we do is that, since it is about looking beyond borders, so it's important for all of us to understand and appreciate what are the challenges that we face, because not all of you get to work with government personally, so we get to work with all the government and we see what are the challenges we face. First is lack of awareness. Of course, we all know that there is a lack of awareness. The lack of awareness is just not at the government level or consumers level or industry level. It is right from the bottom of the pyramid, which is consumer, till the government level. So when I say lack of awareness, not necessarily on IPR issues, but what the industry is doing, what government is doing, there's so many initiatives government of India has taken. But many startups or industry is just not aware of it. So that level of lack of awareness is a big challenge that we face. Lack of coordination, of course. Custom has so good initiative. Police is doing their own. They have their IP cell. So we from USPTO side, we have been working with Telangana Police Unit as well as Maharashtra Crime Unit on seeing how crime, cyber crime can be done with. So when we work with them, we realize that police themselves have been doing so much, but when it comes to coordination with the central government, there is a lack of coordination. Why so? Because state has their own subject, central has their own subject, and then in between, with so many important issues, small issues like coordination gets missed somewhere. So lack of coordination at every aspect. Lack of coordination with the industry and government, because small thing like custom recordation system, many industry just don't know that they should go and record their product online with the custom recordation system. At the same time, I'll again take the example of custom recordation system. So all of those of you who know what is a custom recordation system, it's like recording your brand with custom office, so that whenever there is a consignment coming for your goods, custom on their own can take action on it or inform you, seeing the, your database. So just an example, having a, why custom needs to set up a recordation system separately when intellectual property office already have a recorded system in place. So little coordination on there will save a lot of resource, money, and at the same time, build up the coordination and collaboration between IP office and custom. Fear of losing. Industry have the fear that if they share too much of database information with custom, with police, that information going to leak out. At the same time, custom feels that custom police, when I say custom, it's like enforcement official or government entities. They have a fear that, too much of doing work on behalf of industry responsibility will go down. Same with power fight. When I say power fight, we are working very closely with the government of Bangladesh and Nepal on various IP legislation. And what we realized that, just to convince IP office of Bangladesh that custom also has a role to play in IPR was so difficult. Because IPR office always thought that, IP is their power. Then nobody should come in their space. So just to make them informed that, they have a different role to play in IPR and IP office has a different role, took a lot of time for us to come out with the custom rules now, which they have in a draft stage. They'll be implementing it very soon. So these are just few examples that I'm citing, more so because here many of you are custom, police, and industry. So it's need of the hour today with the globalization, with the e-commerce coming in place, is we need to collaborate at international level, not just, sitting in silos in country, within countries, because our issues have just gone beyond borders. It has really gone beyond borders. And we cannot be sitting and doing things on our own. Lack of appreciation for the changing scenario, what I mean by this is that, it's very difficult for us to convince government, that come out, think beyond your traditional laws. But having just set rules and regulation is not going to help with the changing scenario. We have e-commerce coming in. Every day, law, the way, the mechanism, everything is changing. So thinking beyond, appreciation for the change in the present economy, present international scenario is very important. So if not coming out with some separate legislation, one needs to come out with some kind of notification, circular, which can have an immediate impact on the current situation. Issue like satellite piracy, how is government going to tackle it? It's going beyond border. So a guideline on something which could be an action-oriented, immediate action-oriented, can be the only solution I can see with my experience. Conflict of interest, many issues like geographical indication, we have conflict of interest in the region, like we see issues from Bangladesh, Nepal, and India on these issues. So these are some of the challenges we are facing from USP2 side when we work with intergovernment on the SAARC nation. Going forward, it's very important, that especially in an issue like IP, which is, though we call it a territorial right, but frankly, I don't think it should be a territorial thing, because IP is the only thing which goes beyond border. You cannot have your product only in India if you have protected it here. So having some kind like international IP charter, we from USPTO side, we have been doing regional conferences in the SAARC nation. So what we do is that we invite custom, police, judiciary, and IP office representative with industry representative to talk about various issues and problems that they are facing in between enforcement and what are the gap in between their enforcement action. So that has really helped us. In fact, there was a program that we organized in India with the FDA and the state drug authorities. We had all representatives from all state of India come in to Delhi, and we had central custom officials, police officials, and that particular dialogue for 3 days gave so much of way forward that how custom of that particular state can collaborate with drug authority to combat this drug trafficking and spurious drugs coming into the state. Because as we all know that drugs and all is a state subject, so it's very difficult for state and center to collaborate unless there is some mechanism they have like separately with the all enforcement officials. Regional MOUs, when I say regional MOUs, like someone from the panelists just spoke that they have a MOU understanding, I think Bjorn spoke about it, that like for us, we have an understanding between Government of India and US government that we'll be working towards cybercrime. We will be trying to identify the host sitting in different country, in our country and in India, and see how best we can get it down on the website. So those kind of MOU would be really helpful when we are talking about regional cooperation, international cooperation, regional coordination, cooperation amongst all these brand owners, custom. When I say this, what I mean is that, custom officials from all the SAARC nation should have some regional coordination system, center, where one senior custom official from all these countries should meet quarterly to understand what is the issue between the borders. As we all know that India has porous border and it's almost open border with all the countries in neighboring countries. So unless all the custom officials, at least one each from the country, come together and there's a mechanism where they can sit and discuss what are the issues happening cross-border. Because when we talk about spurious drug crime, cyber crime, it's just not about an industry issue now. It is about a country's image, brand image of a country. So unless enforcement officials come together and form a central body or whatever we can call a regional coordinating body, things is not going to work out in such particular scenario where we are today. Initiative that we have been doing from USPTO side, we do lots and lots of regional workshop, and it's not about only regional. Sometimes we go beyond region and we make it inter-regional, like we bring Southeast Asian country representative and we have South Asian country representative sit together under one roof for 3-4 days and just brainstorm what are the best practices the custom there or police there is following, what are the best custom Indian government or for that matter Nepal government can follow. At the same time, we do very forward-thinking programs where we sit and discuss, what are the next step that we should be taking. We also sit with other missions like UK, Italy, Australia, wherever, and we discuss the issue that we have been facing in a particular country. Because more the voice, better it is for us. I see Interpol here, so we have worked with Interpol also, as in various associations, just to see how all voice together can speak about the issue and come out with some solution. So that was a short presentation from me. If you have any question, I'll be more than happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shilpi. It was most insightful. One noticed that while you talked of a lot of intergovernmental programs which you are conducting, do you also have consumer awareness camps, programs involving government and the consumer federations?
So we have been doing actually a lot. Am I audible? So in fact, we have been doing a lot, both in India as well as in the region. What we do is that we don't go ourselves like USPTO work, but we collaborate with various industry associations. In fact, we collaborate with as many industry associations, and we see to it that all stakeholders are met with. Like if we have to train or educate lawyers, we have a different association with whom we collaborate. If we have to train various school kids, then we collaborate with universities. We collab for industry, we collaborate with FICCI, CII, and all possible associations. So we have been doing this in even in countries like Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh, Pakistan, everywhere.
And in most countries, I think in most countries, the police also plays a very important role in implementing IP-related laws. And as you're aware, the police are hard-pressed for time. IP ranks very low in the list of priorities simply because law and order is far more important for them. How do you enthuse the police officer to look at IP violations?
So for various countries, for different countries, we have a different strategy, frankly. A country like Sri Lanka, we have felt that, enforcement officials always have this grudge that they are not paid well, one thing. We also appreciate that. Another thing, they are not appreciated for what they do. So why should they going beyond their whatever responsibility? So what we do is that a program like this, we do have, that if you do number of enforcement or action in IPR over a year, we give you, public award and those kind of incentives. And for a country like India, where things are a little more developed, like I said, we have been working with Telangana Police Unit, and recently we have worked with Maharashtra Police Unit, and you won't believe the kind of support we have got police. The only thing that they tell us that get industry on board, so that our work is reduced a bit. So we are trying to form an industry group which will, if not sit within the police department somewhere in the office, but be responsible for any issue which comes up and inform police, and then police will take action.
Thank you so much, Shilpi. The floor is open now for questions. In case you have any questions, you may please do so. Can I request the mic to be given? You could.
Excuse me, Mr. Jha, this is something like tobacco. You said of imported tobacco, smuggled tobacco. Now it is in India. How can we conduct a raid operation on the tobacco? That trademark is not registered in India. There is no copyright, nothing, no authority letter, nothing is there.
Sorry, can you come back with your question? I thought you were asking some person who made a presentation of tobacco. Can you come back with your question again?
This is something like that. There is a cigarette, smuggled cigarette, coming from Dubai, America, or anywhere. We have to conduct it. There are manufacturers, there are traders. It's widespread now. It's cheapest. Now we have to we found it. Illegal it is smuggling. It is smuggling only. Now we have to stop the smuggling. How can we stop the smuggling there? Police is not taking action. Police is not taking any action as it is a customs work. Customs are not taking any action because they are far flooded out. Could you please assist us?
You see, I think the customs at the point of import or export, in case it's an illicit import or export, are taking action. Julian just now mentioned about the cooperation with the police, with the customs authorities of India leading to seizures in Poland. I know for a fact from the presentations made earlier by Mr. Kaushik that the seizures made in India of tobacco and tobacco products have been substantial. Now, if your question is about enforcement or is the question relating to IP, I'm not really able to follow, I'm sorry. If it's IP, Shilpi will throw some light on it.
It's enforcement.
Enforcement, a lot has been done, a lot more can be done. You'll appreciate the fact that several million containers come into the country. They don't come declared as cigarettes, obviously. They're concealed within a 40-footer. So it is all based on intelligence, and action thereon is taken. There has been enormous success by the Indian enforcement agencies. I can say that with some degree of authority. Yes, despite it, as the tobacco industry will tell us, there's also been smuggling. The high rates of duty, which Tim was talking earlier, the Australian officer, about the high rates of duty, while they are there to discourage consumption, they also act as a huge incentive for smuggling, because that becomes that much more arbitrage is available for smuggling of cigarettes. So it is a challenge, but a lot of work has been done.
I know, that is a practical point of view. I mean to say
Yes,
that
please.
I am an investigator,
Okay.
private investigator.
Okay.
We have been handled the work to combat anti-smuggling operations only. We know there are manufacturers also in India. There are smuggling also is carried out. For example, I will show you a sample. This is the original sample. It is smuggled. There is I know the details, how it is smuggled and how it is manufactured in India. So likely, I want to conduct a raid on the and smuggle goods. Now smuggling, when I report it to the police, it's quite very difficult. They take money and get out. No more their actions. I want to say, so motor raid, police is not conducting it. We can't do anything. They want authority. Who is going to give the authority? Government of India? Law, police action, who is going to do? How to catch them? How to, high revenue losses of the government is there.
What I would suggest, your point is well taken. What I would suggest is that you pass on this intelligence to the Customs Department in case you have got specific information of the nature which you're talking. I'm sure the DRI will, I don't see any representative of DRI here, but they'll be delighted to have inputs from you which can lead to a seizure, and you may also get rewarded. There is a reward rule in place. Thank you so much. Any other questions, please?
Hello, sir. Afternoon. So basically, my question is related to Mr. Watson and Saldana, sir. So my question is like, if you talk about the enforcement of any counterfeit good, like for example, India is being chosen as a destination country for the counterfeit good. India is being chosen as a destination country for counterfeit good from like different nations. Like the moment the counterfeit good or an illicit trade being done, we try to have a mechanism for like seizing it up, or there is an enforcement agency behind it. But are we able to trace the product from which country they have come in, first thing? And secondly, are there like any bilateral agreements being done with those countries, which is the major source of those counterfeit goods? Because majorly we can identify that China is a country from counterfeit goods come in India. But what about other nations? Are we having such settlements with those governments? So enforcement. So in which way we are doing that?
I think I may be able to answer that. One of the reasons why we highlight the framework is because the most effective place to stop counterfeits is the place where they're made. Now, by the time it gets down the line, down to the new country, we've missed several opportunities. And one of the reasons why Julian is here, why my colleagues from the UK come to India, not just that, we've assessed that the OECD say that India is sixth. There are far more problematic countries. But if the opportunity arises to work with the government, with the customs officials, then we are very, very interested in doing that. And again, in terms of IP, one of the reasons why I want to maintain some dialogue with Julian is that if there are opportunities for us to do just that in India, then I want to take up those opportunities. Does that answer your question?
Just one point on, if this allows. Like, can you put sanctions there? Is it possible any institution can create sanctions on those countries where the source is it? Because the problem is, majority, the products are being counterfeited. That's a fact. Like they're on the trades, billions of dollars are being wasted on it. So why not curb it in the nib itself? So can the sanctions can be there? Is the talk on the table for the sanctions of such countries? Or it is just the geopolitical situation is so worse, we cannot do that?
The sanctions issue is quite a challenging one, and I'm going to think very briefly before I answer that one, because my part of government sits under business, and what we are trying to do is promote trade. We are not in a position. We are a very small island. We're not in a position to impose sanctions across the world. I think that's probably the best answer you're going to get out of me.
We're nearing 2 o'clock. Any further questions? We are way behind schedule. Yes, please.
I have one small question. This is Dr. Gunanand Chaudhary, and I work for US multinational called SC Johnson Products Private Limited. And I am heading the technical chair of industry association called HICA. My question is, there are so many products, pesticide products, which are illegal imports entering into the country, and that is having very detrimental impact on the human population, on safety reasons. And similar kind of pesticides are being used by farmers, and when those products are going into other countries like European Union, the products are failing there badly. For example, rice. So recently, basmati rice failed in European Union testing due to those illicit import and smuggled pesticides which are not registered in the country but entering in this country through porous border or through customs. And how and what kind of measures from regulatory perspective, from policy perspective, industry can take to support government and to support the industry at large?
I think what you can do is sensitize the government about exactly what you're saying, so that they're aware of the fact that such things also come. That's the best I can tell you. And the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence, again, will be a source for you to give these sort of details which they can act. Yes, Hugh?
I would add, I know I have a colleague from Interpol here. I'm not going to put him on the spot, but Interpol run a very successful collaboration called Silver Axe, where movement of counterfeit pesticides is tracked, it's monitored, and information is shared worldwide. So if you have any information, I'm sure there are routes for that information into my colleagues in Interpol. And if you'd like to speak to me after, I'd be happy to follow that up with you.
Yes, please.
My name is Sunil. I represent the Human Hair Association. We've been working with the human hair is a $9 billion industry, out of which $6 billion is being smuggled out of India. We've done several representations with DRI, customs, locally, through the Burma border. It's going through, 80% of it is going through the northeast border in India. It's a $6 billion problem that we were talking about. The industry, the legal industry, what he was referring to, A, B, and C, it's going through all types of smuggling. So my question is, we've been trying to work through the regional agencies, DRI, we send them a query, they'll look at it, and then it stops, right? But whereas lakhs of people have lost their employment. We've been working with DGFT also. My question to you, Mr. Najib, is that where is DRI? Why is DRI not party to this? And CBIC, we've been working with, it's like DRI is the enforcement agency for CBIC, right? But we should have, as an industry, we've been trying to actively work. Why can't we have a single point of contact in CBIDT, the Central Board of Taxes, and then they coordinate that? What do we need to do as an industry that's dying with a $6 billion problem? And all of it is being smuggled. I was party to a transaction, it's like minutes. So you can do almost a 1 crore transaction within 15 minutes and get money from Burma into India within 15 minutes. That's the extent of the problem. So can you recommend something? I'm in Delhi specifically for this purpose, trying to work with the government agencies on part of Human Hair Association of India with lakhs of people, that's the...
Oh, you're talking of illicit export of hair, human hair.
ABC, illicit export, under-invoicing, smuggling, pure smuggling.
Okay. What I'll ensure, you please give me your card. I personally will ensure that the DRI contacts you to get further details. That's the best I can do. Why they're not here, I do not know. They've certainly been invited for tomorrow, they're here. The chairman CBIC was earlier in the day. I will ensure that your voice is heard by them, and somebody will get in touch with you. That's an assurance I can give you. Yes, please. I suppose nobody seems to be feeling hungry. One last question, please, and then we'll start winding up. We are well past our schedule.
Thank you very much for your, this looking beyond borders. We have talked a lot about the physical transactions, illicit transactions, but we have not given any heed to, illicit trade of wild animals, which are very much required in our daily life because of the ecosystem. And the species are depleting in lot of orders because of ivory and lions and other creatures, where we can hold the, I would like to hear something about any international convention is being held, or the Interpol is active to mitigate all these, live animals which are extinct in a long run. Thank you, sir.
You're aware of the CITES, of course, having shown an interest in animals. I can assure you again that the Indian enforcement agencies are making a lot of seizures of star tortoise, of snake skins, of tiger bones and elephant tusks, ivory. There have been a lot of seizures in the northeast. I know that the Calcutta unit of the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence has made outstanding seizures in the last 6 months. They're all concerned about it. The police authorities across the country are concerned about it. Internationally, most administrations are party to the CITES Convention of Endangered Species, and flora and fauna are certainly an area of concern for all of us. So I think there's work done. But typically, like we have been discussing since morning, a lot more can and should be done. And that's why we're all here to sit down and discuss and find out ways and means. It doesn't figure in the top commodities, which is why you did not perhaps find a discussion on that. Unfortunately for that, it doesn't figure in the top commodities. But having said that, there is work being done. More work has to be done. So thank you so much, everybody, for your attention. Yes, yes.
Sorry, in relation to CITES, just to say that our representative here in India that covers CITES is a national crime agency. So if you give me your card before I go, I'll make sure that if you have intelligence in relation to that, that you have a receptacle from a UK perspective to pass that information to.
Yeah, I'm being reminded of the fact that the DGDRA is addressing the session tomorrow. So if you're present tomorrow, please raise this issue again. And the gentleman who raised the issue of human hair, I do not know whether they're there tomorrow. But nevertheless, if you're there, please do ensure that the details are given to him. He's also addressing the session tomorrow. So thank you very much, Hugh, Julian, Vincenzo, Shilpi, for what has been a most stimulating session. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Shah, and all our esteemed panelists for that invigorating session. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the lunch break now. We would request everybody to kindly reassemble in the hall at around 2:45 p.m. after lunch. Enjoy your meal.